Hi everyone, I am Chris with Simply Classic, and we are always excited for these days. This is a new pattern day. So let's take a look at our brand new Simply Classic pattern. I'd like to introduce you to the Kaplan. The Kaplan is a bag that can either be worn as a shoulder bag or you can lengthen the strap and it can be worn as a crossbody. It is a fairly slim design and it can easily be worn as a crossbody without any problems with bulk. A great thing about the bag is it is kind of a masculine and or feminine bag depending on what kind of materials you use. So I encourage you to get creative with this and make it your own. Another thing that's fantastic about it is you can certainly use either 2 or 3 different fabrics to embellish your bag. We highly recommend you do that. Make it your own. Post them on the Facebook group. We'd love to see what you do. A really cool feature of the bag is in the back we have a slip pocket. Okay. I'm going to show you how to do this kind of fancy finish on it. And then to open the bag, all you have is a twist lock, super easy to get in and out of. And then on the inside, just like normal, we have slip pocket, zipper pocket, and a key fob. So we're going to run through the bag today. It is called the Kaplan, and we are excited. We're going to go over pattern pieces, and then we're going to get started. We're going to start by going over pattern pieces. We have a strap, and this is a crossbody strap size. If you don't want to wear it as a crossbody, you just tighten the strap connector and you'll be able to wear it as a shoulder bag. We also have 2 strap connectors. We have 2 main body pieces, and the main body pieces are shaped like this. Now, one of them is going to have a zipper or let's just say a pocket opening. It's not a zipper pocket, it's a slip pocket, but you're going to have a pocket opening in one. So make sure that you adhere your stabilizer before you cut that pocket opening. Once you do, if you would like, you can put a little bit of edge paint along the inside of the cutout, but that's totally up to you, not necessary at all. So we have 2 main body pieces, and you can see this was done out of the print. We have 2 side pieces. Now the side pieces are shaped like big triangles, okay? And the Decaville light, or your preferred stabilizer, is on the back. You want to make sure, of course, that it's 1/4 of an inch away, because we are using a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance for most of this bag, not all, but most of it. Let me also point out that on your main piece, your seam allowance on the sides are 1/4 of an inch, on the top and on the bottom is a 1/2 inch. So when you go to position your stabilizer, make sure it's 1/4 of an inch from each side, but again, 1/2 inch from the top and the bottom. The side pieces are going to be 1/4 of an inch from each side, a 1/2 inch from the bottom, and the top is going to be about a 1/2 inch as well. Okay, from there we are going to move on to our bottom. And our bottom is just, of course, one piece. I did this out of the solid, and it has some Decaville heavy, or again, your preferred stabilizer. 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around, so the stabilizer is a 1/2 inch from all of the edges. We have 2 flat pieces, okay? Did this out of the solid again. And one piece has some stabilizer and one piece does not. Okay, the keeper that we put on is going to end up going on this piece with the stabilizer, and therefore this piece with the stabilizer is going to be on the front of the bag. You're going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around, and then you're going to have a 1/2 inch seam allowance here at the top. So as you place your stabilizer on your flap, just make sure, and you really want to have just slightly more than a 1/4 inch all the way around, because you don't want to sew exactly right next to your stabilizer. You want to give it about just a hair off so that you can turn it easily. We have our flap accent, and I did the flap accent again in the solid, and on this flap accent, to prepare it, what you want to do is fold it in half so that the short ends meet, okay? Once you do that, you're going to mark the centers. I then, on the wrong side, drew a line down, matching these two center marks, and then placed my Decoville light right against that line. It's going to end up being about a 1/2 inch from the other short edge here, and then just center it from side to side, okay? So stabilizer is only on half of this piece, and this is the accent piece going down the front of the flap. The flap accent keeper I did in the print. Now again, you can cut however you want. If you prefer the flap accent to be, meaning this, to be the print, you could certainly do that. I mean, just get creative here. But the flap accent is just one piece, no stabilizer, no nothing. It's just a piece all on its own. Okay, for the exterior, we also have this pocket accent piece. And again, it is just a piece that you cut, no stabilizer, nothing on it at all. And I did this out of the solid because it is going against the print, because it is the top of the slip pocket on the back. So just keep that in mind as you're cutting out your pattern pieces. You probably want to use a contrast for this. If you decided to use your print for the center, you're probably going to want to use the solid gray or brown, whichever color kit you got, for the accent. Okay, moving along, we have two exterior slip pocket pieces. And I did this out of course, the lining. I do have woven interfacing on the back, and these pieces are actually a perfect square, okay? So we have two of those. We also have two upper lining pieces. And the upper lining pieces I decided to do out of the print. I have Decoville light, or you can use your preferred stabilizer to go on the back of these. It is a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around. So you're going to have it a 1/2 inch from your edges. And we have two of those. We also have our slip pocket accent, which I did out of the print. We have our key fob, which I did out of the print. And we have our zipper, interior zipper pocket overlay, which I also did out of the print. Okay, those are all of the pieces cut from the faux leather. We're going to move on to lining, which we talked about the exterior slip pocket lining pieces. We have a slip pocket, interior slip pocket piece, and actually that's just one large piece. Okay, so again, put woven fuse or some kind of woven interfacing on the back, one large slip pocket piece. Two zipper pocket pieces, okay, again, woven interfacing on the back of each of these. And then we have our lining pieces, and the lining pieces are, it is a box bottom lining for the interior, so you'll see you have little squares you have to cut out of the sides, bottom sides of each. Of course, put woven interfacing on the back of each of these, and we have two lining pieces. Okay, so those are all of our pattern pieces. As I mentioned before, the hardware, it's not a lot. We have a zipper for the interior. We have two rectangle rings, a slide adjuster, a twist lock, a 1/2 inch swivel clasp for the key fob if you'd like that, and then also a zipper pull for the zipper. Okay, so let's get started. Step one is the strap and strap connectors. So we're going to go ahead and draw a line down the center of both our crossbody strap and or shoulder strap, however you want to wear it, and both of our strap connectors. I usually put 1/4 inch double-sided tape on either side of the line, about 1/4 inch away on the strap, and then I put 1/2 inch double-sided tape over the line on the strap connectors. So we're going to peel the backing off of the tape on the strap connectors, and all I'm going to do is fold the long edges into the center. And in this instance, I want these long edges to meet each other, so basically touch each other in the center, okay? Just like that. So I'm going to repeat on this other strap connector, and that is all we need to do at this point for our strap connectors. So I'm going to go ahead and set these aside, and we will work on our strap. So of course with the strap, we're going to peel backing up, or the double-sided tape off of one side. And whenever you do straps, we've talked about this a few times, crossbody straps are long, make sure you don't pull on your strap when you fold it up. Another thing is you want to fold it up just shy of the line, okay? So I'm not going to push my hand across. I'm just going to very carefully, without pulling on this, fold this up just shy of that middle line. So with crossbody straps, we do not want the two ends to touch, these two long ends. You don't want them too far apart because then your 1 inch or however big of hardware you're using won't fit. You want to just have them a very scant 1/8 of an inch away from each other. And the reason why is because when you go to turn this again, fold this in half again, you want to give your fabric space to turn. If these two edges are butted up right against each other, you are not going to have that, and you're going to have a better chance of your handle either buckling or twisting on you, which of course we do not want to happen. So I'm just going to go ahead and fold that side, and now I'm going to turn and fold this other side. So let's remove backing off the tape. I'm going to turn this around in the other direction. And I'm just going to fold this edge up, again staying just shy of the line. So you can see, I'm sure here, because it's black, a little bit of that space. So what's going to happen now is as you turn this, it gives, to fold it in half, so we can do that in just a minute, you will see that it gives this strap space to turn. These two ends will kind of take up that extra little space, and it's going to provide an opportunity for a nice flat handle. So I'm going to continue folding, and then we will fold one more time and clip it all the way down. Now from here, if you would like, you can go ahead and use a shape cutter to cut some kind of shape in the edges or on the edges of the handle. Alternatively, you can just keep it flat and straight, and when you turn it, you'll just have a straight edge, and you can certainly base coat or edge coat that. You could certainly and also use some kind of strap end. So it's whatever you prefer. I personally like to use the shaped edges. It certainly saves on hardware cost. So I'm going to go ahead and just use an end punch to punch that shape in, and then we'll go ahead and stitch. So the shape cutter that I use is actually this 1.5 inch punch. You can get these from leather supply stores. Again, not necessary at all. You can certainly use another option to finish your edge. And all I do is put this along this end here and use a mallet and punch it, and then I get this nice rounded edge. So I always do that before I stitch because I want to be able to stitch around the curve. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. Whenever I do a curved edge like this, I take some hand stitches to make sure that they're nice and even and they look good. And then whenever I do handles, I always use an edge guide to make sure that the stitches are even on both edges and are nice and straight. Now I am going to do a little back stitch here, and I'm just going to make sure that this part or this end is this end I attached to the strap adjuster, and it'll be hidden. You won't really see that at all. So now that the strap is completed, I'm going to put a little bit of base coat and edge paint on the ends and in between steps, so I can go ahead and let it dry, and it'll be ready when we're done our bag and we need to attach it. Step 2 is the exterior construction, and we're going to start with these strap connectors. I give you a measurement as to how far to measure down from one short edge. Go ahead and draw a line with a silver marking pen or some kind of fabric pen, and then put a small piece of double-sided tape over that line. You're then going to go ahead and put your rectangle ring on. And you're going to put the rectangle ring on the side that's furthest, that's the longest from the mark you made, okay? And peel the backing off and fold that down and put the short edge against the line. Then you're going to fold the other edge up, and they're going to meet. And you're going to see that one edge is obviously longer than the other, and that longer edge should be where your rectangle ring is. I'm then going to put another piece of double-sided tape just over those edges, just like that. So we're going to repeat the process. Fold this down, turn this, fold the short edge up, and then put just a small piece of double-sided tape on there. Okay. Then from there, you want to take your side pieces, and we're going to put these strap connectors on. Now the top of the side is the top of the triangle, okay? You're going to peel the backing off of the tape, and I give you a measurement to measure down from the top of the triangle and put your strap connector on. Now, I will say that typically I have you place the measurement I give you is from the top to the top of the actual strap connector. This time I give you a measurement from the top to the top of the ring, okay? So just make sure that you measure that correctly. I'm also, and this is very typical of how we put these strap connectors on, I'm going to measure 1 inch down from the top of the strap connector now, and I'm going to draw a line. And that's just going to tell me where to turn when I stitch this on. I always want to make sure that that line at least captures this longer edge of the strap connector, okay? And I'm just going to, and I don't want to get too close to the hardware because then your presser foot isn't going to be able to get around it and it's going to be very difficult. So I'm just going to do a small square here to attach the strap connector, and then I'm going to put a rivet here. Now, if you do not have rivets or you do not have the ability to set a rivet, or you just don't want to do rivets, you can go higher up with this line, and I would suggest you go maybe another 1/2 inch up. So in that case, what you'd be doing is from this actual edge here, you would come down a 1/2 inch instead of a full inch. It's whatever you prefer. So we're going to go ahead and stitch. Come over one more, just tiny stitch here. I am going to pull the threads through to the back, and I'll tie them off just to give this a nice neat finish. And I want to make sure I start and stop in the same hole. I'll go ahead and pull these threads through to the back. Tie them off. I always like to put a small piece of double-sided tape over my knots. Just helps make sure they don't come apart. And you can't see it obviously from the back. Okay, so from here I will wipe off my markings from my pen, and then I'm going to put a rivet 1/2 inch from the top edge here. So we have our folded edge, and we come down a 1/2 inch, and I'm going to place a rivet. And if you would like, you can place another rivet right here in the center of your rectangle. That's up to you, however you'd like to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and place my rivets. Okay, I'm going to set these rivets. I'm going to go ahead and attach my other strap connector, and then we'll move on. Both of these strap connectors are now completed. So we're going to go ahead and set the side pieces aside for just a minute, and we're going to work on that slip pocket for the back. So you want to take your slip pocket accent piece, and you can either use wonder clips here or a little bit of double-sided tape. We're going to fold it in half with the long edges meeting, and we're going to stitch a pocket to it. So I'm just going to put a little bit of double-sided tape on here. Going to fold these long edges together, and these are going to be hidden, so if they're not exact, it's okay. You do want to try to get them pretty close though. Okay, so from here we're going to take one of the exterior slip pocket pieces, and if you recall, I told you that these were a perfect square, so there's no really right or wrong edge to this. But what we're going to do is go ahead and place one of the pieces on the top of this accent piece. So I'm matching the raw edges and I'm placing the accent piece on the right side. And I'm just centering it. The pocket is slightly larger. I'm just centering it. So now what we're going to do is using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. This is really important. We're going to go ahead and stitch this accent piece onto the pocket. Go ahead and backstitch here. Once you have that completed, go ahead and flip this piece up. And now we're going to top stitch. So we want the seam allowance to go down towards the bottom of the pocket. So essentially this accent piece is straight. We're not trying to bend it. And we're going to top stitch on the lining, catching that seam allowance underneath. And as I stitch this, I am pulling it tight because I want to make sure that seam allowance is, or the fold here is all the way open. So take your back piece, which is the piece with the opening. And what we want to do is place this piece so that the wrong sides are together. We want to, from the front, we obviously don't want to see the stitch that we made. That's why it was really important to make it a 1/8 inch seam allowance. So we want that stitch to be just below. And you want to be able to get in and out of this pocket easily. So you want to be able to easily stick your finger in here. If this is too far up and you feel like you're having to fight to push this out of the way to get your finger in, it's not going to work, okay? So, and the way it's designed, obviously you don't want to see the stitches. So as long as you're hiding your stitches, your pocket here is up high enough to hide your stitches, you should have a nice even pocket here and you should be able to get in it no problem. Now you can either use some double-sided tape here or you can just try to hold it in place. You can certainly use your sew-type magnets as well, whatever works for you. I'm going to take just a little piece of double-sided tape, put it along the bottom of the pocket only to help me hold this in place. And of course you want to try to center it from side to side. You want to make sure that it's pretty even. I'll do it this way first. And then let me make sure from the front it looks good. Okay, so from here we are going to start stitching 1/8 inch beyond the edge. So we're going to stitch just the bottom. We're going to start about 1/8 inch beyond this side edge, and we're going to stitch all the way to the other side 1/8 inch beyond. Do not backstitch. Go ahead and pull your threads through, and then once we do the rest of the pocket stitching, we'll tie them off. so my stitches are right just beyond this edge, about 1/8 of an inch. You can see where this thread is coming up, that's going to be about 1/8 of an inch going this direction when we turn it, and the same thing over here. So pull these threads through to the back. We can go ahead and tie them off. And to pull the thread through to the back, you just want to tug on the bobbin thread, which the bobbin thread is obviously the thread in the back. Just tug that bobbin thread a little bit, and as you do, you'll see the loop come up from the front side, and then you can just pull those through. So once I do that, because I don't want to put double-sided tape here on the pocket, I am going to burn these threads just to make sure they do not come apart and they seal shut. Okay. So from here, again, you can either use double-sided tape or you can use your sew-tight magnets. We're going to put some double-sided tape on the top of this. Basically, we want to finish off our pocket. So I'm just going to stick that on there. And now we want to take the other pocket piece and we're going to put this face down so that right sides are together. And we want it to be just beyond this double-sided tape. See, the edge of the pocket doesn't have to be right at the edge of the double-sided tape. You just need to put it above it so that it holds it in place. Okay, and then for added security, again, you can use your sew-tight magnets if you'd like. Let me go ahead and throw one on there. And now what we're going to do is start in the hole that we stopped here. We're going to stitch up, across, and then we're going to come down this side and end in that same hole. Do not backstitch, we're going to pull our threads through. So let's pull these threads through to the back and tie them off. Sometimes you have to tug on that bobbin thread pretty good to get the front to come through. And since this is on the inside and nobody is going to see it, I am going to put some double-sided tape on my threads just to make sure they don't come apart. Okay, so we have our slip pocket. So now we just need to finish this off by stitching the ends. Now, of course, just like when you do a zipper pocket, you're always going to have a little bit extra here because you're putting one layer of the pocket higher than the second layer. So go ahead and just even these up. And then we're going to flip this around so it's right side up, and I'm just going to pull the edge aside and we're going to stitch down, we're going to stitch across, and then we're going to stitch back up the other side. have any extra, you can go ahead and trim that off. Okay, and then our slip pocket is completed. Cool, huh? All right, so from here we are going to set this aside for just a second, and we're going to deal with our front. We want to put our front and our sides together first, and there's a couple different ways you can do this. Now, let me just talk about convex and concave curves. So we have basically a situation here where we have a concave and a convex curve. And they're not severe, but they are there. And so it is going to kind of determine how we put these together. You can do it one of two ways. You can either, make small clips in the side, which would be the front here, and wonder clip these together, or you can let the machine do the work for you and pull the fabric through so that you basically just let the ends come together on their own. Now, I'm going to show you both ways because the second way does take a little bit of practice, but it's not difficult. It's just takes practice like everything else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place just tiny little slits here. Now, this is a 1/4 inch seam allowance, okay? When we sew these two together, it's going to be 1/4 inch because of the fact that it is curved. Usually when you do curves, you don't want to use bigger than a 1/4 inch. You want to use the smallest seam allowance as possible. Because if you don't, what's going to happen is that if you take a 1/2 inch seam allowance, now you're making this part of the seam even shorter and this part of the seam even longer. Okay, because you're going in. So as you come in on this is from point A to point B is getting longer, and from point A to point B here is getting shorter. So you always want to make sure that you use the smallest seam allowance possible. So I'm going to just put little snips in here to allow this fabric to turn and curve and do what I want it to do. Okay, so from here, I'm going to go ahead and put some wonder clips in. I'm going to start at the bottom. And I'm going to put one coming this way and then here. Now, this bag is rated as intermediate, and the reason why is because of this curve right here. It's not anything super difficult, but it is a curve, and I know that that can be sometimes a little tricky. Now you're going to see that your side piece is not going to make it all the way to the top, and it's by design, okay? So you see here you've got, roughly a 1/2 inch extra, and that's okay. You want to make sure you start stitching from the bottom and go up to the top. Okay, so I'm going to do that. And again, using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, get my ends to meet here. So that's our seam. So we want to make sure that the seam allowance is going towards the side. Okay, it's going to want to naturally go that way. And we're going to top stitch on the side panel all the way from the top to the bottom. And I'm going to start, you can kind of feel where your decaville is, or your stabilizer, and this is going to fold in. So when you start your top stitching, you want to start from that approximate place. It's not going to hurt to go all the way to the top, but if you want to, you know, keep it so it's not overrunning, it's just going to go to the top of that triangle. So here's the top stitching, and you can see again we have about a 1/2 inch over here, no problem. My top stitching starts about 1/4 inch from the top of the triangle and goes all the way to the bottom. Okay, so now let's look at how we would do this with no wonder clips. What I'm going to do is, again, you always want to start from the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and put my foot in, and I'm going to start with my 2 pieces like this. And then as I stitch, I'm going to bring the edges together. Okay, so I'm going to turn this camera just a little bit so you can see from the top. Okay, I think we have the camera adjusted. We're going to go ahead and stitch these together with no clips. So I'm going to start with my 2 ends even here at the bottom. Put my needle in. Do just a little back stitch to hold it together. And now as I stitch, I'm going to be taking and curving these so they go together. And again, we have our extra here at the top. To me, that's a lot easier, but again, I know it takes a little practice, but I encourage you to try. So now we're going to top stitch. Okay, so we have the front completed with the sides attached, and we are going to go ahead and install our twist portion of our twist lock. So I give you a measurement to measure down from the center of the front to install the twist lock. I went ahead and marked that. I'm going to go ahead and cut my holes. I always like to put some double-sided tape over the back for a couple reasons. One, to help protect the lining, help it from rubbing against, and then also it just kind of helps the hardware kind of stay in place. Okay, if you would like a place to put your bag tag, you can certainly put it on here at the bottom. You could also put it on the flap, so I'm going to leave that up to you. I'm going to go ahead and install mine at the bottom. I usually go about between 1/2 inch and 2 inches. So now that you have your bag tag, we have the front part of the back part of the twist lock on. Everything's good to go. We're going to go ahead and now put the back on. First thing you need to do is clip your pocket out of the way. Just clip it to the top. Because if you don't, you're going to catch it in these side seams, and we certainly don't want that to happen. So whatever your preferred method, go ahead and attach your side, one of your sides, to the back, okay? And it's going to overlap the front up here at the top. And what that's going to do is, as we put the lining inside and we stitch across, it's going to help us maintain a point here. So go ahead and stitch. Go ahead and open this up. And then once again, we're going to top stitch on the side piece. Now, as you top stitch, you want to grab or basically start at the top stitch point on the side here of your side piece. Okay, because we are top stitching on the side piece. So what's going to happen is that the point where your two backs come together, so you're going to have kind of a strange looking thing back here, but it's okay. It's going to go towards the side like this, and you're going to stitch. Just making sure I'm catching my seam allowance underneath. And then you can see here that I did not top stitch all the way up onto my front piece. I started here on the side piece and just came down. Okay. So we are going to go ahead and stitch this final side. Now, it's going to be a little weird because you see here the front, or the back rather, comes out at an angle this way, and then of course this one's coming in the opposite direction. You can, again, wonder clip if you want to, and if you wonder clip, your bag's going to be sitting kind of at a strange angle when you wonder clip. Okay, it's going to feel like it's almost twisted. It's okay, that's what you want. Once you stitch and we turn, it's all going to flatten out. So I'm going to go ahead and stick my needle in. Just do a little back stitch, hold it in place, and then stitch. So now that that's complete, we have to top stitch in the tunnel. So what that means is that we are going to lay that seam allowance flat inside here, and you can either start stitching from this top edge and go down, and of course we're stitching on the side seams. We want to make sure the seam allowance is going in the right direction. Or you can take your bag and you can take it from the back of the machine and kind of push it towards the top and start there, whichever method you prefer. I am going to, let's see, first of all, make sure my side or my seam is going in the right direction. And I'm just going to go ahead and start here at the top. Making sure that I do not stitch up on top of the front of the bag. I'm going to start right where the side is. And just take it slow. Now, if you get to a point where you get far enough along that you can't seem to get in here anymore, then what you can do is stop stitching, pull your threads long, then turn the bag and start stitching from the other direction. So let's see how far I get. Okay, so I'm going to pull this a little bit more, pull it down, and we can iron this when it's done. Okay, so I'm continuing down, and let's say at this point I want to stop. I say, oh, I'm scrunching my bag too much, I don't want to go any further. What I'm going to do is just go ahead and take my needle to the highest position and pull it out. I'm going to leave my threads nice and long, and then I'm going to come in from the opposite direction, so basically start from the bottom, pull it up, and then I can see I am, let me pull this thread through first. I can basically see where I stopped, right? It's a lot easier now at this point to come up from the bottom. I'm going to start in that same exact hole that I ended. And then I'm going to continue top stitching down. And then I'm just going to pull this other thread through, tie these off, and nobody will ever know that I started and stopped to do my top stitching. We will check it out in just a minute and make sure of that. And as I peek in here on this seam, you can see, well, let me turn it for you so you can see. You don't have to turn your bag right now. Don't do that. I'm just doing that to show you. Okay, first of all, you can see how nice and flat this bag sits. Even though it felt like it was twisting on you, it really will not. So let's look at these back top stitches. And I don't know if you can tell, but I can't tell which one I started and stopped on. I think it was this one, but I wouldn't swear to it. Okay, so that's an easier way. If you can't get all the way through to the bottom, just stop and then restart, no problem. All right, so let's go ahead and put the bottom on this bag. So before we put the bottom on, we want to mark the center. We already have the center. I have the center of my bottom because I put my bag tag on about 1.5 inches up from the center, and I wanted to mark the center of my front. So I did that already. I'm going to go ahead and mark the center of my back as well. And when I mark the center, I actually match the side seams. And then that's the center of that back piece. And then I'm going to flatten this, match my front and back center points, and then go ahead and mark the sides. And of course, you can either do this with a fabric pen or a clip, a notch, basically, like what I'm doing. Okay, on your bottom piece, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go through and we're going to find the center of the sides and also the front and the back. So go ahead, and I usually don't put purse feet on crossbody bags, so therefore purse feet are not included in any kit or anything that you buy of the Kaplan. However, if you want to, now's the time to do it. So I'm going to match up. Now remember, the long edge of your bottom needs to go against the front and the back, which in my case is the patterned part. So I'm going to stick this on. Put some clips. And do the same thing on this side. And put some clips. Now when we stitch these long sides, we're not going to stitch all the way to the end. I want to start stitching a 1/2 inch from the edge, which is basically where the decaville or your stabilizer ends. So I'm going to put my needle in and start stitching right here at this corner, stitch all the way along, and I'm going to end over here at this corner. Do not stitch all the way to the edges, and we're going to do that on the front and on the back. And this seam is a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So now that that's complete, what we're going to do, and let me show you here, I think you can see that the stitching stopped right there at the edge of the stabilizer on both ends. So now we want to cut our bag, and we're going to cut the main part of our bag, not the bottom. What I'm going to do is right where the stitching ends, okay, so here you can see that's where the stitching ends, I'm going to stick my scissors in and cut up to that point. Okay, so I'm just cutting the main part of the bag here. I'm going to do that on all 4 corners. Okay, once that's complete, we're going to be able to turn this bag and match our centers and wonder clip in place. Once the bottom's clipped, we're going to turn this so that it's standing straight up. We're just going to kind of push this side down, and we're going to stitch right across this short edge. We're going to repeat on the other side. And now we are going to cut these seam allowances back on the bottom here. Okay, once those are cut back, we can go ahead and turn the bag. I'm going to take this over to the iron now and go ahead and press out these wrinkles that you see here and there. It's going to be easier to do it now before the lining's in there. Okay, I have the front pressed, or the exterior pressed. I'm going to set that aside. And actually, before we move on to our lining, we need to do our flap. I almost forgot about the flap. So we're going to take our flap keeper, or our accent keeper, and we're going to take our accent flap. And we are going to, I'm going to draw a line down the center of the keeper. And then we're going to fold the long edges in and stitch. So draw a line, get our double-sided tape, and I like to use 1/2 inch for this. Whenever I fold the edges into the center, I like to use 1/2 inch. It's going to be just like the strap connectors. We're going to go ahead and fold this in, and we're going to make sure that our edges meet, our long edges meet in the middle. Okay, so that is our flap keeper. Let me set that aside for just a second, and we're going to take our accent flap. Now, we want to put the short ends together, and we're going to do it right sides together. I am going to stitch these long edges only, and I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance when I do this. It's going to be a little bit further away from the stabilizer, but make sure you use 1/4 inch. Also, make sure that you backstitch really well at this open top. Okay, and you can see here that my stitch line is a little further away from my stabilizer than normal, and that's okay. From here, we're going to turn this thing. And I first want to, at the edge that's folded, I'm going to go ahead and make little snips here, kind of at an angle, because I want to get any bulk out of these corners that I can. Then you're going to, what I did before when I did this is I kind of opened this up and I started over here on this side. And I just tried to push that in. I'm just going to try to use my thumb best I can. And then when it gets kind of long, I took a 1-inch ruler and I stuck it down in there, and it really kind of worked well. It is a little bit tricky, but You're going to take some kind of point turner or something, and you're going to want to poke these ends out. So I'm just going to use my tool here to go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to go rub this on a warm ironing board just to get all of the little wrinkles out. From this folded side, I give you a measurement. You're going to measure up and you're going to make 2 marks, one on each end here. We're going to top stitch from this mark down, across, and up to this other mark. Don't back stitch. We're going to pull our threads through the back, tie them off, and then we're going to top stitch the rest of this when we put it on the flap. Okay. Also, I'm going to stitch, actually going to stitch 2 rows, 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch from each long edge on the keeper. This top stitching on the flap accent here is a 1/8 of an inch. It doesn't really matter which side is the front and which side is the back. If one side looks better to you, make that the front. I'm going to pull these threads through this way. And I'll tie those off in just a minute. Okay, let's do our stitching on here. And I am back stitching on this one. So that's the 1/8 of an inch, and now I'm going to do a 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to repeat on the other side. Okay, so the flap keeper is done. I'm going to tie these off, and then we're going to move on to putting this on the flap. On the flap that has the stabilizer, I give you you're going to find the center, and then I give you a measurement. You're going to measure down and make a dot. From this dot, you're going to go to the left and the right, a measurement I give you in the pattern. Okay, and you're going to make another dot. The strap keeper is going to slide in, but we want to slide it in from this dot down. So we're going to need to make slits. This is slightly larger than 1 inch. It's about 1.25 inches. So I'm going to take my ruler and measure down about 1.25 inches so that I know where to make my slit. Okay, so it's going to be like this. So grab a craft knife and a cutting board, a ruler, whatever it is that you use to cut slits, and we're going to cut these in. So I always use a ruler when I'm doing this because I want to make sure that my lines are straight. So I'm just going to line this up. And you're better off to have a slightly smaller hole than a slightly larger hole. Okay, makes sense? So I'm going to go down to the 1.25 inches, but actually I might only go down to about 1 1/8 inches just to be safe, because I can always cut it bigger. I cannot cut it smaller. So I'm going to put my point in, and I'm just going to come down to about 1 1/8 inches. Okay, make sure that's cut, and it is. You can see that there. And we're going to do the same thing on this one. Okay, so there we have our slits. Now, if you would like, this is optional, you can edge coat the side of this slit right here. You don't have to worry about the inside edge because this keeper is going in, and I can see I didn't quite make my holes, at least that one is not large enough. This one isn't quite either, so I'm going to go ahead and extend them. Again, okay if they're a little bit small starting out. And actually, I'm going to use my sharp scissors to do this, just to get the rest of that. So I can fit them right in there. And snip. Okay, so going back to what I was saying about edge coating. When you put this in, and you want it to be a tight fit, you're not going to see the raw edge of this inside slit, inside part of the slit. You're only going to see the raw edge of this outside one. Now, it's a non-fraying fabric, you know, it's about the same color. You really don't need to do anything with it, but if you want to, that would be the place you would do a little bit of edge paint. Okay, make sure this side fits as well. Now, you can pull this tight, but remember that this needs to go behind it, and you want to give it a little bit of room to do that. So I'm going to just slightly pull on it just a little bit, and you can see, I think, hopefully, there's just a little bit of space there, okay? It's not a lot, it's just enough to give it room to easily slide in and out. And it's not like you're gonna be taking that in and out all the time, it's really more for looks. So before I decide if I'm gonna edge coat, I'm gonna go ahead and take my lines off here and kind of clean this up and see how it looks. Once you've determined what you're gonna do here, as far as edge paint, I ended up not putting any, I don't really think it needed it. You're going to go ahead and stitch right beside the slit 1/8 of an inch away to hold this keeper in place. It's not going to be a lot of pressure on this. It's really just to make sure it doesn't come out at any time. You're going to have about 1 inch on each side showing to just kind of give you an idea of the back side of this and what it should be looking like. So I'm going to go ahead and just using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, go ahead and stitch. I am going to just pull my threads through the back and tie them off here because, again, it's going to look better from the front, and there's really no pressure on this keeper. So I'll pull these through, I will tie them off, and then once I do that, and this is purely optional, you can put a rivet here. Again, it's not going to get a lot of pressure, it's just really more for decorative purposes, and so get creative with this. You can put 1 rivet, you can put 2 rivets, you can put 3 little rivets. That would be really cool. Matter of fact, I might even do that. You can put some kind of decorative snap on each side. Again, the possibilities are endless, so get creative with it and do whatever you feel is, you know, what you want to do, or don't do anything. I mean, you don't have this by itself with the keeper and there's going to be fine. So I'm going to, you know, put some rivets. I'm going to go ahead and tie these off, and then we'll go ahead and get our actual accent in and stitch it on. And actually, no, we won't. We will stitch the flap together and then put the accent on. So I'm going to do this though. We'll be right back. So I decided to put 3 rivets, small rivets on each side just for fun. Okay, you're going to take the other flap, put it right sides together, and we're going to clip all the way around. Now you're going to want to sew from this side because this is the side with the stabilizer, and you want to make sure you do not stitch on the stabilizer. We're going to stitch around this flap, leaving the top open. We're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you can see here that I am a ways from the stabilizer, and again that's okay because now when we flip this it's going to come out really nice. So I want to trim the seam allowance back, not necessarily here at the top, but basically around the curves. I'm going to trim this back to about 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so now go ahead and turn the flap. Let me see how nice it is. Because basically that extra little bit between the stabilizer and the stitch line is kind of taken up by the seam, so it really works out nice. I don't even think I have to clip it. So now let's go ahead and top stitch. You can continue to leave the top open or you can close it. Either way, it doesn't matter. We're going to stitch it to the back here in just a minute. So there we have our flap. So take your flap keeper and we're going to slide it in and we're going to line the top, I say keeper, sorry, the flap accent. We're going to line the top of the flap accent up with the top of the flap. Okay, so from here, starting in the same hole that we stopped, we're going to go ahead and top stitch this onto the flap. I am going to do one little back stitch, so I'm going to come forward. I'm going to go back 2, just to kind of make sure that it's going to be nice and secure here. Okay, and come up. And I'll go ahead and stitch across this top part. And then stitch down to my next hole. Pull this through. Maybe I won't. Well, it's not going to come through, so I'm just going to go ahead and clip these off. Okay, and then eventually, of course, we will put our, and you can either do it now or later, go ahead and install our other section of our swivel clasp. So I think I am going to go ahead and do it now. It's just going to be a little easier to do it when it's not on the bag. And what you want to do is just, you know, obviously you just have a small amount of space here before you hit the flap. So I'm just going to line this up, center it, go ahead and draw in the box. I'll go ahead and punch that hole and then install this section. So now that we have that completed, we are going to go ahead and attach this onto the bag. So of course you want to find the center of the back. So go ahead and do that. Really, you should be finding the center of all this before you even start. It would be a lot easier. Okay, we are going to put the flap so that the right side of the flap is against the back, because what we're going to end up doing is flipping this over, obviously. So I'm just going to go ahead and put some wonder clips on here, and then we're going to just baste this in place, or stitch this in place, using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Just enough to hold it. And it is a really wide flap. Okay, so you're going to be, you know, maybe just about 3/4 of an inch from the side seam on each side. So now our exterior is completed. Take a little sneak peek here, see kind of what it's going to look like. And obviously we don't have the lining in here. It's going to have a lot more body when we put that in, but pretty cool. So let's go ahead and set this aside, and we're going to work on the lining. And the lining is pretty much the same as, you know, the bags we've done in the past. We're going to start out by working on our slip pocket. So I'm going to take my slip pocket piece, get all these threads off, and then put the short sides together, and we're going to stitch. Now, here, we're going to do about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance here. Okay, we're going to turn the pocket by folding that seam allowance down, holding it down with your thumb and your finger, and then pushing it through. I'm just going to go ahead ahead and poke out the little bit of corner there that needs it. Now I'm going to take this to the iron and press it. Now, if you received the Kaplan in a quarterly subscription box, you would receive a little sample size of flatter, and this is a perfect application for it. You're going to go ahead and spray the flatter onto the pocket and then iron it, and it's going to be nice and flat, and it's going to smell good. So we'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll return. Now that that pocket's nice and pressed, we're just going to stitch 1/8 of an inch to get this pocket closed. I'm going to take our pocket accent. I put 1/4 inch double-sided tape along each long edge. You'll peel the backing off one of those and center the pocket, or the top of the pocket, right along the center of that accent piece. We'll peel the other side off and then fold this right over the top. Okay, I've got this off a little bit. Let me fix it. Okay, and now we're going to top stitch. Once you're top stitched, go ahead and clip off the ends. So that it's even with the pocket. Just clip off those little ears. And our slip pocket is complete. We're going to take one of our lining pieces, fold it in half so that we can find the center. You're going to center this slip pocket, and I give you a measurement in the pattern as to how far down to come. And I want to make sure this is centered. Now, this is a fairly large pocket. So I'm going to put a pen slot in here. I always like to carry a pen with me. You never know when you need it. So I'm going to draw from one side, doesn't matter which one, a line 2 inches over. Excuse me, 1.5 inches over. And just draw a line down. Now this is the Sew Line Air Erase pen, which will erase over time. Ooh, look at that. Can't even see it the first time. There we go. Okay, and now we're going to stitch down, over, up, and down, over, and back up. If you go to our resource page on our website, you will have a link with a discount for these magnets. So go check that out if you're interested. And I always like to come over one stitch so that I can put a rivet right there in between to hold the tops of this pocket in place. from here, and this is optional, you can just leave the pocket as it is, or you can go ahead and punch holes for rivets, which I like to do just because I feel like your pockets, you know, you're in and out of those a lot, and I don't want there to be any problems with the pockets coming off. So I'm just going to punch the holes. And again, on this pen pocket, I go right in the center of the stitch. So I came up, I went over one stitch and went back down, and I'm going right in the middle of that because I don't want to cut my stitches at all. You might not think that a pocket or anything will come apart if one little stitch, one little section is cut, but trust me, it will, unfortunately. The other thing I like to do whenever I put rivets on a piece of lining like this is I usually cut a small couple little pieces of Decaville Heavy or some kind of stabilizer and put that on the back side just to give it a little more stability. Usually our main pieces already have the Decaville on there or the stabilizer on there, but these lining pieces do not. So I'm going to go ahead and add rivets. I will set the rivets. And then we'll move on to the zipper pocket. So you can just slide these on. And just go ahead and set the rivets. Okay, from here, we're going to set this aside, and I'm going to take my zipper pockets, my zipper. The zipper's a little short. Let me go recut a piece of zipper. This time, my zipper is the right size. Now, you can either just wonder clip this in place or use double-sided tape. I just like using double-sided tape. I feel like it kind of helps hold everything in place. And if I was doing this by myself instead of on a video, I would take this to my domestic machine, my Burnett, and I would go ahead and stitch it there. Just for ease of videoing, I would go ahead and stitch it on here, but it doesn't love it. Because I know a lot of you ask me, how do you get your industrial machine to stitch on cotton? And it struggles. It does not like it. It was not meant to stitch on fabrics this light weight. All right, let's stitch this. So we put the wrong side of the zipper against the right side of the pocket, and then we're going to turn this so that the zipper tape is nice and flat, and we're going to top stitch it down. And this is where this machine really struggles. And we're going to repeat that process. And then from here, go ahead and straighten out that zipper tape and top stitch. Okay, I'm going to add my zipper pull, and I'm going to set this aside for just a minute. Take your other lining piece, find the center if you haven't already. And we're going to take our zipper overlay piece and put some double-sided tape along each long edge. I'm going to peel the backing off of this tape and then center this let's see, 4. Okay, so I'm going to move it a little bit. Okay, so we are now going to stitch around the outside edge. I'm using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I usually put this on the slip pocket and I forgot it, so I'm going to put it over here. Since this is a pattern, you can't see really the stitches, so I'm going to do just a little back stitch here to hold these in place, and then I don't have to worry about tying the threads off. A lot of times the solids, those back stitches are a little more visible. So we're going to cut the center out. Then we're going to take our zipper pocket, put some double-sided tape right along the edge of the zipper tape. It's pretty much right where we sewed. I like to have my zipper pulls closing, or my zipper pockets closing towards the left side, but you might want that opposite. If you are left-handed, you might want them closing towards the right side. So the choice is yours. We're going to peel the backing off of this tape. maybe. Let's try this side. There we go. And then we're going to center the zipper in the center of this. Okay, so now we're going to stitch on the inside rectangle. I'm going to try to make sure my stitches are aligned and then do a little back stitch here. So from here you want to take your upper pocket and pull it down towards the lower pocket. Go ahead and throw some wonder clips on there and then clip off the bottom section. It's going to be about an inch to an inch and a quarter, and it's just because we put our zipper on, obviously, and the two pockets were the same size, and we have this folded in one direction. All right, turn your piece around so you're looking at the right side. Fold this edge back. We're going to stitch down and back stitch really well at the bottom. And we're going to turn it. We're going to back stitch really well and come back up. We're going to leave the bottom of the pocket open. Go ahead and trim the seam allowance down. Go ahead and burn the edges of your zipper tape just to make sure that does not fray. And then we will work on the key fob. So I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to take my key fob piece. You can either wonder clip or use double-sided tape. I'm going to put it down one side. And then we're going to peel the backing off and fold this piece in half so that the long edges meet. We're going to trim it down so it does not have to be exact, but you want it to be pretty close. All right, we're going to stitch using a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to take this to the cutting table and I'm going to trim this seam allowance back to 1/8 of an inch. Take your 1/2 inch swivel clasp, go ahead and slide it onto your key fob piece. You can fold that over. Go ahead and punch a hole. Now, instead of placing a rivet here, you can always just stitch. There's nothing wrong with that. All right. So now take your, it doesn't matter which piece, whichever side you want your key fob on. And just base that in place so you don't forget it, because I am really good about that. Okay, from here we're going to go ahead and put our upper linings on. So you can take your upper lining, and your upper lining it's got kind of angles on the sides, and that's just to help reduce the bulk in your lining. So the shortest long edge is going to go against your lining. Okay, so go ahead and place it on there and flip it over. Go ahead and wonder clip them in place. And we're going to do the same thing on the other edge, or other lining piece. The shortest long side is going to go against the lining, and you're just going to flip it. We're going to stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. We're now going to flip the upper lining up. We're going to make sure that the seam allowance stays in the up position. Okay, so the seam allowance is behind the upper lining, and we're going to top stitch on the upper lining. Okay, so from here we're going to put the lining pieces right sides together. Go ahead and match up where your upper linings meet. Most important point to match. So I'm going to do that on each side. And then go ahead and clip the rest of the sides together. And then we're going to stitch. Now, when you stitch, you want to start stitching at the point you want the upper linings to match. Okay, so I'm going to start right here, put my needle in, back stitch up to the top, and then come back down and come straight down. You are going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and you do not need to increase your seam allowance on the side pieces here on the lining, because it's accounted for with this upper lining being angled. Put my needle in. You want to back stitch really well at the bottom. Go ahead and trim your seam allowances back, but just trim them back up to, or just beyond the bulk here, because you do not want to trim it at the very top, because we need to open the seam allowance, and the smaller the seam allowance, the more difficult it is to open. Okay, so leave about an inch worth of seam allowance at the top. And you notice we did not stitch the bottom. We'll leave that open for turning. And our pocket is still open. Okay, the bottom of our pocket's still open here. So I'm going to make sure my zipper pocket is open. I'm going to take the main part of my bag. And if you prefer to have your zipper pocket in the front or the back, or if you've got a preference, just kind of pay attention to how you're putting it in here. The lining is smaller than the bag, so it is going to be a tight fit. But that's to ensure that we don't have a bulky lining. So go ahead and pull it in. And match your side seams. Now your side seam here is angled, okay? So when you're matching your side seams, you're really looking at the point of the triangle. Let me show this to you and draw it on. So the side seam, okay, here's our side, is really right there. Okay, so when you're lining up your side seam to the side of your bag, you want to line it up even with the point of the triangle, not the seam itself. So if you need to draw that in, no problem, just go ahead and draw that straight line. Okay, so match those lines to your side seams of your lining, your upper lining. I'm going to open the seam. Go ahead and match that up. And clip. Okay, and then once you have that done, go ahead and clip the rest of your bag. And you may have to work with it a little bit because you do have a flap here that's adding some bulk. And if for some reason your lining and your upper lining, or your bag, your exterior, interior basically are not lining up, go ahead and take a larger stitch on your lining. Okay, so just increase the seam allowance slightly on your lining and then you should be okay. Okay, So now that we have that done, I'm going to go ahead and stitch a 1/2 inch basically along this edge of the stabilizer all the way around the bag. So now that we have that completed, we're going to go ahead and pull the lining up over the bag. Okay, we're going to go ahead and push the lining inside the bag, getting a nice fold here along the upper lining. And then I'm going to go ahead and wonder clip all of this in place. Now you're not going to be able to wonder clip the back of the flap, but it should stay pretty nice for you. Okay, now I want you to look at these sides. See how the point is right at the top of the side? That's how it should be. And if it's not, no worries. Usually the first time we make a bag, it's a little iffy, right? But the reason why I want to show you this is because if you are using a domestic machine, and I'll probably make this again on my Burnett just to kind of show you that it can do it and show you where I might make changes. But one of the things I would do is I'm not going to stitch over this triangle because there's a lot of bulk right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start top stitching here on the other side of the triangle and stitch across to the side of this triangle. Then I'm just going to back stitch or end or whatnot, and then come over here to this side of the triangle and then stitch across to this side. It's just going to, nobody's going to know you didn't stitch. Nobody's going to know you should have, or you shouldn't have, or whatever, stitched over those triangles. And it really is going to keep the triangle looking nice. I've got some threads here I need to cut. And a matter of fact, even with my industrial, I might do that. So let's go ahead and top stitch this. And you can certainly do this on a flatbed, or you can use a cylinder arm, whichever. Let me go ahead and do this on my flatbed just to show you that you can do it. And I'm going to start right on. Now, because there's some bulk in the triangle, I am going to put something underneath my foot because I don't want to ruin the leather, or the faux leather, okay? So I'm going to try to straighten this out as best as possible. I'm going to go ahead and put something under that foot to protect it. Start right on the edge of that triangle, put my needle in. And again, because all of the top stitching is being done on the printed fabric, I am going to do a slight back stitch here. And that way I don't have to try to pull any threads through anywhere. And obviously when you do this on a flatbed, you just need to do a little bit more adjusting. And I'm almost at this triangle on this side, so I'm just going to stitch up to it and just do a little back stitch. And there is the back stitching along the back flap. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing on the front. So I'm going to go ahead and get this on and then make sure I protect my foot. Right there at the bulk of the triangle. And again, do small back stitch. And then come forward with it. The main thing to remember whenever you're stitching, it doesn't matter what you're making or what stitch you're doing, side seam, top seam, whatever, is just make sure you have a section of bag or whatever you're stitching to do a nice straight stitch on. And it might only be a small section, and that's okay. Then just shift and adjust as you need to. Make sure, of course, whenever you do that, your needle is down. I always take my foot off of the pedal because I don't want to accidentally stitch, especially when my finger's close. So I'm approaching this other side. Shift one more time. Make sure that key fob is out of the way. I'm going to stitch right up to the triangle and then back stitch. Okay, and there's the top stitching. All right, so from here we are going to pull the lining out of the zipper pocket. So first pull the zipper pocket lining out, then reach in and pull the bottom of the lining through the zipper pocket. That key fob is determined to get in my way. Keep pushing it out of the way. Okay, so we're going to take this bottom of this lining out. Go ahead and wonder clip it in place. There's our our rectangle, or square, I should say. Learn my shapes. And we're going to stitch. And because this is the lining, of course, we're doing the 1/2 inch seam allowance. All right, go ahead and cut back this seam allowance. And then we're going to box our corners. So we're just going to take the corner, we're going to open it up, match the raw edges, and go ahead and stitch. Now nest your seams, and what that means is I'm going to put one seam allowance going in one direction, the other seam allowance going in the other direction, so that they just sit together nicely. Because they're small, we can't open them up. Of course, you want to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance for this as well. Just make sure I have it nice and straight. We're going to trim that down, and then we're going to repeat that process for the other one. So open up the lining, go ahead and nest your seams. Now you want to make sure that whichever direction you had your bottom seam going, you want to have it going in the same direction on the side. Okay, and then we're going to stitch. We're going to trim that back. And then we're going to push all of this inside. And then we're going to take our pocket lining and fold it over, or under, I should say, about a 1/2 inch. And wonder clip it in place. And then go ahead and stitch using just a scant 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, just enough to hold it closed. All right, push your pocket in. You're going to poke those corners in really well, and then we're going to attach our strap. I went ahead and edge painted my edges here, you can see, and tried to mix the paint to get a gray, and it came out too light, as you can see. It's not good, but that's okay, because this is just for demonstration purposes. I probably will go back and darken it and just go ahead. I might even just use black and paint over it. But we are going to take our strap adjuster and go ahead and run it through the bag. Now there's no swivel clasps on this bag, so this strap attaches directly to these rectangle rings. So go ahead and punch a hole. We're going to set a rivet, or of course you can stitch. Whenever I say rivet, a rivet is not mandatory. You can certainly stitch in place of riveting. So I always like to punch when it comes to my straps, because they're thicker. I always like to punch a hole first and then kind of mark the second hole and punch it. Otherwise they tend to go a little wonky. So now on these rivets, I'm going to go with a little bit larger size. So it'd be more like a 10mm rivet. All right, I'm going to go set that. To ensure that your strap is going to be on this correctly, because you don't want the top of the strap adjuster to be on the top of the strap, if that makes sense. We're going to come from above, okay, and go onto one side from above. So this is obviously the end that's not on the strap adjuster, and you're going to come down through the rectangle ring. Then you're going to thread the other side, or thread that same side through the rectangle, or through the slide adjuster again. Okay, and this is so that this side is not showing on the top. Okay, we want this side to show on the top. And then on the other rectangle ring, you're going to come from below and come up and through it, and then either stitch or set a rivet. I'm going to set a rivet, so let me punch a hole. Go ahead and mark through that. Punch the second hole. So come up from underneath, come through. Go ahead and stick this in. I will set this rivet, and then we are completed, and we will take a look at the bag. So here it is, the Kaplan. That's a fun bag to make, isn't it? My favorite part, I think, is the slip pocket in the back. And it should fit most cell phones. We really tried to make sure that it was deep enough that it fit larger devices as well. Of course, it's got a fantastic flap and all of the goodies inside, which you saw, the slip pocket, the zipper pocket, and then of course the key fob, which I did not forget today, yay, has this really cool flap. And again, I cannot wait to see what you do with this bag. I am sure you're going to come up with some amazing different ways to embellish this flap accent, to come up with different closures, and y'all are just so talented when it comes to that. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Cannot wait to see your Kaplans. And until next time, everybody, happy sewing.